I'm going to feel bad for giving my quick summary review for Whiskey.Mafia Leo's Family, because it was obviously made by somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience with making games, and was written by somebody whose primary language definitely isn't English. This is obvious to me with little to no research, because Whiskey.Mafia Leo's Family is genuinely the worst game I've ever played. I wouldn't even call it a game because you're given so few choices that there was only one moment in the entire game that I would actually describe what I was doing as gameplay. For the most part, this is a visual novel. You watch pixel art move in this game, and you see words type out at the bottom of the screen, and that's the game. Don't get me wrong, I don't have a problem with visual novels. Visual novels typically have a story that's interesting to read with characters that are worth getting to know. Whiskey.Mafia Leo's Family doesn't have either of these. What it does have is a load of typos. Hell, there's even a typo in the title of the game. The title of the game seemed interesting to me at first, until I played the game. I thought it was going to be some sort of puzzle of a title that I needed to solve during my time with the game. Now looking back on it, it was just naming things that were objects and ideas in the games, and whoever translated the game forgot to put a space in the title. It seems like it was kind of foreshadowing what I was about to experience. Let's talk about the story. I've been recently playing The Last of Us Part 2, and people want to say that game has a god-awful story. That's wrong. You can argue that The Last of Us Part 2 has a story with huge flaws. Whiskey.Mafia Leo's Family has a god-awful story. And a god-awful title too that I'm just going to shorten to Whiskey.Mafia, because saying the full title makes me feel like one of the poorly written characters in the story. I won't spoil anything about the story, but don't worry, you shouldn't want to play this game anyways. You play as Christopher doesn't have a last name, who just graduated college and wants to make more money. So through a family connection, starts working for the Mafia at a surprisingly quick rate. That's about it. I don't even know where to begin with this game's story. There are so many problems that I'm just overwhelmed with issues to point out. Let's just start with the fact that none of the characters are written like they're in the Mafia. There's very little language that would differentiate characters from one another at all. If you didn't read the name of who was speaking, you would have no ability of knowing who was speaking through the context of what they were actually saying. The language they use isn't very period appropriate, except for the one time the N-word gets thrown around. Scenes just happen for no reason. For instance, we get to see Christopher go to college for no reason at all. We meet a character just so we can read a reenactment of a scene ripped directly from Goodfellas, and right when the story does something slightly interesting, it just ends with "to be continued." There's so many issues with this game down to a fundamental level that it makes it hard to even describe what's exactly wrong here. The main character doesn't have a personality outside of being a Mary Sue. The actual premise isn't original or executed in an interesting way. The pacing is so bad that the events will come and go without you realizing what you read was actually supposed to be one of the interesting events in the story. I could nitpick this game's writing to death, and I haven't even stressed how many spelling and grammatical errors there are in this game. Like, they couldn't even spell poly right. Instead of nitpicking and complaining about the story, I'm just going to write off the story as not an A+, and then give my super advanced critique of the gameplay. I think the game tried being a point-and-click adventure. Typically in point-and-click adventures, you can point and click on things. This game barely allows you to do that. The game just gives you an arrow of all the things you can click on, then you click on that thing, then your character walks to that thing, then the next scene just happens. There are no items to inspect, and there aren't any characters you can interact with. Rarely, every once in a while, you'll get what some people might call a mini-game. For instance, the game starts off early with a puzzle, or I think whoever made the game wanted it to be a puzzle. There's no tutorial for the puzzle, but I still passed it, even though I didn't know what I was doing. I don't think there was a wrong answer to the puzzle, to be honest, but I don't think it'd be worth it to try to find out if there was a way to fail the puzzle. I did actually reach a failure state twice in this game. Once during one of those mini-games, you have to press the W key a bunch. I didn't see it coming because it never happened before or ever again, and when it did come up it caught me off guard, so I ended up failing it. Once I expected it though, all I had to do was press W over and over again until the scene was over. That was the gameplay I was talking about earlier. The other failure state I hit was during the one and only story choice you get. Either stay with the job you got out of college that you're not very satisfied with, or go join the Mafia. I don't want to nitpick the story anymore, so I won't go into how I feel like there are more than those two options in life. I picked stay at your job because I was wondering what the story would be if you didn't join the Mafia, and the game just says, "Did you really want to do that?" and then sends you back to the main menu. That's about it gameplay-wise. I don't want to spoil everything in case something I said here convinces somebody to play the game, so let's just talk about the art and the UI design instead. Maybe the only saving grace of this game is that the pixel art isn't bad. Characters look different, environments look detailed enough, and from a distance this game doesn't look like trash. This is probably why I was convinced to buy this indie game that I'd never heard of, hoping that it was a diamond in the rough. If only I saw a screenshot of the terrible UI in the game. Let's talk about the pause menu. I believe it's in Russian. That's okay because I deciphered that the bottom word is the quick game option, and I think that's the only option you're going to need when playing this game. Even the text that appears for the dialogue is poorly designed. I do like the typewriter font this game has going on, but I don't like how it slowly types out the dialogue and shifts everything around the more that gets typed out. Luckily, you could just skip past the dialogue's typing animation, but there isn't a way to go back and view previously spoken dialogue. That's something I feel like every visual novel game should have, but I'm actually cutting this game some slack, believe it or not. So I had to be careful when clicking to not skip any potential bits of story. Not that any of the story being skipped matters, but if this game is going to be entirely story-driven, I may as well take all that the game can give me. I don't really want to seem like one of those harsh critics that shit-talk every game they run across, and that might be the impression that I'm giving with this review. This game, though, is an exception where I genuinely cannot find anything about this game that would make me recommend somebody to get it. I feel bad because this is most likely somebody's project they poured a bunch of time into. I don't want to talk about the story anymore, but I do want to talk about a lesson I learned during this game. Not that I think the game has any message other than, don't join the Mafia, maybe. When I was playing, though, I couldn't help saying to myself somewhere in the middle of the game that I can do a better job writing this game. And that's when it dawned on me that I'm still on page 2 of a book I've been wanting to write for the past 6 months. While I'm sitting here shit-talking this game, whoever made it was able to write and release an entire video game that was put out in a few different languages to one of the biggest gaming markets out there. All I've been able to make this month was this shitty YouTube video. Whoever made Whiskey Mafia was at least able to get $6 out of me for a game I'd rate a 1 out of 5, so who's the loser here?